Ever think about how much your favorite video games have in common with tabletop RPGs, like D&D?
Hmm.
What if those worlds could, collide?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny you should mention that because just the other night I was running a game where
Oh, yeah.
my players were in this seemingly abandoned temple. But as they got deeper, the walls started shifting, and then all of a sudden, these holographic projections just flickered to life.
Whoa!
The whole thing felt like they'd stepped into a classic sci-fi RPG.
That's wild. Well, that's kind of what we're looking at today. We've got this stack of articles here from LitRPG Reads,
Okay.
written by author Kira Mensah, and they're all about how to actually create D&D one-shots based on iconic video games.
Oh, that's cool.
So instead of these big, long campaigns, they're like these concentrated bursts of adventure.
Yeah.
It's like capturing the essence of a video game in just a single session of D&D.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really appealing, especially for newer players or players
Right.
who maybe, don't have time for a whole campaign.
Exactly.
Or even if you're a veteran player, it's just a fun way to kind of tap into that nostalgia.
Oh, for sure.
And you have so much flexibility because, there are just so many different genres of video games out there.
Absolutely. And Mensah, the author, she really emphasizes adapting signature mechanics from each game into the D&D rule set.
Right, yeah. It's not just about recreating the setting and characters. It's got to be about capturing the actual feel of the gameplay, right?
Exactly, yeah. And they've got all these great examples for the Legend of Zelda. They have a one-shot called the Triforce Temple,
Oh, cool.
which takes those classic dungeon crawls
Yeah.
and translates them into challenging puzzles that the D&D party has to solve.
Right.
So instead of just finding a key to open a door,
Right.
your players might need to decipher ancient runes or manipulate light beams or even use their spells to activate hidden mechanisms.
Oh, that's so cool. It's a really clever way to take that really familiar element of Zelda and make it work in a D&D setting.
Exactly. And then another example is Whip and Stake, the Haunted Castle, which is based on Castlevania.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah. And so in this one, Mensah really focuses on how to create that Gothic horror atmosphere that Castlevania is known for. And she talks about how the castle itself basically becomes a character
Oh, interesting.
with shifting walls and hidden passages and traps that play on classic horror tropes.
Oh, man. I can imagine players getting really tense trying to make their way through those creepy hallways.
Oh, totally. And then the article even suggests specific enemies you could use, spectral knights that can phase through walls,
Yeah.
and cursed treasures that tempt the players with power but come with a dangerous price.
Ooh, I like that. That adds a layer of
Yeah.
moral dilemma. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and then it's not just action adventure games, right? Mensah also explores how RPGs and strategy games can be used to inspire these one-shots.
Oh, interesting.
So, for instance, there's Materia Wars, The Fallen Kingdom,
Yeah.
which is based on Final Fantasy.
Okay.
And this one features, your classic party of heroes on a quest to defeat a tyrannical sorcerer king.
Classic.
And of course, it includes magic-infused weapons and summons.
Of course.
And the article specifically mentions weapons like flame-brand swords and icy destruction wands, which that immediately makes me think of Final Fantasy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That magic system. And of course, you can't forget about the iconic enemies from Final Fantasy.
Right.
So Mensah suggests incorporating creatures like behemoths and conberries, which, they each have their own unique abilities and weaknesses that the players would have to, strategize against.
Yeah, you gotta know the game.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like a good way to introduce people to the world of Final Fantasy, even if they've never played the games.
For sure.
And then, speaking of strategy, there's the War of Blades and Banners, which is inspired by Fire Emblem.
Oh, nice.
So this one shot leans heavily into that tactical combat,
Right.
where positioning and terrain advantages and even character relationships play a crucial role.
It's very Fire Emblem.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this one would appeal to players who really enjoy that more strategic side of D&D combat.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mensah suggests incorporating elements like permadeath,
Oh, wow.
where just like in Fire Emblem, characters who fall in battle are permanently gone.
So the stakes are high.
Yeah. And it makes the players really think carefully about every action they take.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also emphasizes the importance of character relationships in this one.
Okay.
So just like in Fire Emblem, characters can build bonds with each other through like support conversations, which then translate into bonuses on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So it adds this like whole other layer of depth to the gameplay.
Oh, for sure. And it encourages like that role-playing aspect and developing your character's personality.
Exactly.
All right.
All right, now let's jump into the world of platformers. So Mensa actually adapts Super Mario Bros. Into this one-shot called Plumbers and Pipe Mazes,
I love it.
where players have to navigate like this treacherous underground labyrinth that's filled with all those like familiar hazards,
Yeah.
like crumbling ledges and rotating blades and even bottomless pits.
Yeah, and all of that can be easily represented with D&D.
Exactly.
Creative use of traps and terrain.
Exactly. And of course, no Mario-inspired adventure would be complete without power-ups.
Right.
So Mensa suggests incorporating magic items that grant abilities like enhanced jumping or fire resistance or even temporary invincibility.
Oh, that's fantastic. I can already imagine like seeing that play out, like players going crazy.
Yeah, it captures that like whimsical and chaotic energy of a platformer, but within the, the D&D framework.
I love that. Yeah. It's very creative.
Yeah. All right, and then there's the Trial of Time, which is inspired by Portal.
Oh, nice.
So in this one, the players find themselves in a series of puzzle chambers that are overseen by this, like, mysterious AI.
So you got to lean into those like mind-bending puzzles.
Oh, totally, yeah. And that dry humor that Portal's known for.
Right.
The article suggests using illusions, teleportation traps, and even altered gravity effects to recreate those signature Portal challenges.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
And of course, you got to have that like witty and slightly sinister AI to guide the players through the trials.
Oh, yeah.
Offering cryptic clues and commentary.
I bet the players would have a blast with that one. I can already imagine it.
Yeah. All right, speaking of memorable experiences, let's go into the realm of horror. So, Mensa tackles Resident Evil with a one-shot called Mansion of the Undying, where players have to explore this like creepy mansion that's filled with zombies and all sorts of other horrifying creatures.
Yeah, classic.
And this one-shot really emphasizes resource management and strategic decision-making. So just like in Resident Evil, players need to carefully conserve their ammo and heal their wounds and really pick their battles wisely if they want to survive.
It's all about survival.
Exactly, yeah. So Mensa, she suggests incorporating specific horror mechanics like limiting healing items and jump scares and even that like iconic save room concept from Resident Evil.
Oh, yeah.
Where players can find a moment of respite before they plunge back into the nightmare.
Right.
And she also recommends using sound effects and atmospheric descriptions to really amp up the tension.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, make it really immersive.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's Silent Streets, The Town That Forgets, which is inspired by Silent Hill.
Ooh, another creepy one.
Yes. So this one really leans into psychological horror, where the town itself seems to be like alive.
Oh, wow.
And manipulating reality.
Okay.
So I love the idea of using illusions and shifting environments, even whispers of voices in the players' minds to create that like unsettling, dreamlike atmosphere that Silent Hill's known for.
Absolutely. You want to make it really eerie.
Yeah, exactly. And then Mensa suggests incorporating like personal fears into the narrative, but that the horror feels like unique and tailored to each player.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. All right, now let's blast off into the realm of sci-fi. So Mensa offers Cyber Dungeon, The Grid War, which is inspired by a blend of Metroid and System Shock.
Oh, okay.
So in this one, players explore an abandoned space station that's been overrun by rogue AI and mutated creatures.
Classic.
Yeah, and it combines like elements of exploration and combat and encourages players to like map out the station and upgrade their equipment, and they even have to like hack into computer systems to progress.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. And Mensa suggests incorporating like hazards like energy leaks and laser grids and even like zero gravity environments.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To really challenge the players and make them feel vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
And just like in Metroid and System Shock, players can find upgrades for their weapons and armor, which gives them a fighting chance against the station's inhabitants.
Right, yeah. So you're scavenging and trying to up your...
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really cool blend of like sci-fi action and horror.
It is, yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. And then For our final stop, we're going to venture into a post-apocalyptic wasteland with the Wasteland Chronicles, which is inspired by Fallout.
Okay.
So this one really captures that essence of survival in a harsh and unforgiving world. Players are going to need to like scavenge for resources and deal with radiation poisoning. And they're going to have to make really difficult choices that affect their own survival.
Right.
And the fate of others.
It's very Fallout.
Yeah, exactly. So Mensa emphasizes the importance of faction dynamics in this one.
Right.
So players can actually align themselves with different groups.
Okay.
Like raiders or settlers, or even like the remnants of the pre-war government.
Wow.
And their choices, actually have consequences
Right.
to shape the world around them and lead to different outcomes.
Oh, that's interesting.
And she also suggests incorporating like those iconic Fallout elements,
Oh, yeah.
like using bottle caps as currency and giving the players like a Pip-Boy for tracking stats and information, and even adapting the VATS system for targeting specific body parts in combat.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of like explored all these amazing one-shot ideas, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What are some of the challenges that you foresee in adapting these video games to D&D, and how might you try to overcome those challenges?
Well, I think, one of the biggest challenges is finding that balance, right? Like, you want to stay true to the source material.
Right.
You also want to create, an experience that's fun and engaging as a D&D game, so it can't be just like a straight copy and paste, right? You got to translate these elements into something that works within the D&D rule set.
Absolutely.
And also something that allows the players to, use their characters' abilities and all of that.
Yeah.
Another challenge, I think, is pacing. Okay. Because video games, they often have a very different pacing than tabletop RPGs. So you have to find ways to like condense the action and the story into a single session without sacrificing too much detail. You don't want to make it feel rushed.
That's a good point, yeah. And it's also important to keep in mind that not everyone at the table is going to be familiar with whatever video game you're adapting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you have to find ways to kind of explain the basic premise and the mechanics of the game without, bogging down the session with too much exposition.
Right.
So you might need to get a little creative with like handouts or visual aids, or just even a quick summary at the beginning.
Right, yeah, set the stage.
Yeah.
And of course, you always want to leave room for player agency.
Oh, for sure.
Just because you're adapting a video game doesn't mean that you have to follow the story beat for beat.
Exactly.
Right. You want to give your players the opportunity to make choices, explore the world, and maybe even deviate from the original narrative if it makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The best one-shots are the ones where it feels collaborative and everyone, is able to bring their own creativity and ideas to the table.
Absolutely. So with all of that in mind, let's dive a little deeper into the specifics of adapting different game genres. We've talked about some of the broad challenges, but I'm curious to kind of explore like how those challenges might actually manifest in different types of games.
Okay.
So like, adapting a puzzle-heavy game like Portal is going to require a very different approach than adapting like a combat-focused game like God of War.
Right, absolutely. So
each genre presents its own like set of challenges and opportunities.
Exactly. So let's start with platformers. Games like Super Mario Bros. And Sonic the Hedgehog, they rely heavily on like precise timing and jumping puzzles and really fast-paced action.
Yeah.
So how do you go about translating that kind of gameplay into a tabletop RPG?
Well, it's all about reimagining those mechanics through the lens of D&D, right? So instead of having literal jumping puzzles,
you might use traps that require characters to make dexterity checks or acrobatics checks to avoid.
Okay. Yeah.
Or you could introduce environmental hazards that kind of mimic those challenges of a platformer. So maybe there's a crumbling bridge that players need to carefully navigate. Or a series of moving platforms that require precise timing to cross.
Right, yeah. And then what about like power-ups? How would you how would you represent those?
You could easily represent those like iconic platforming abilities through magic items or like temporary buffs.
Yeah.
So that mushroom that gives you super strength could become like a potion of giant strength, and the fire flower could be represented by like a wand of fireballs.
Oh, that's clever. Yeah. So you're capturing like the spirit of the platformer,
Right.
but you're grounding it in the mechanics of D&D.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about puzzle-focused games like Portal and The Witness?
Right.
Those rely so heavily on like spatial reasoning and logic,
Yeah.
and sometimes even like physics-defying mechanics.
Yeah.
So how do you bring those challenges to life at the D&D table?
Well, for puzzle-heavy games, I think it's really crucial to engage the players' imaginations and encourage them to think outside the box. You can use like props or visual aids, or even simple drawings to kind of like represent the puzzles.
And you also might need to like adjust the difficulty of the puzzles a little bit, right?
For sure.
Because the players don't have the same level of like control
Right.
over their characters in D&D
Exactly.
as they do in a video game.
Yeah, so you don't want the puzzles to be so difficult that they become frustrating.
Right.
But you also don't want them to be so easy that they feel trivial.
Right, yeah, you got to find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And maybe, you could offer hints or clues or allow players to use their character skills and abilities to solve the puzzles in creative ways.
Exactly. You want to encourage like problem solving and collaboration.
Right.
And make it so it doesn't feel like just a rote exercise.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right, now let's shift gears to horror games.
Okay.
So games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, they rely a lot on like atmosphere and tension and jump scares to create that sense of like dread and unease.
Yeah.
How do you translate that into a D&D session?
Well, atmosphere is key, I think. So you need to really set the mood. You can do that with descriptions, sound effects, even like lighting if you're playing in person. Really describe, the musty smell of decay. The flickering shadows, the creaking floorboards.
And don't be afraid to use silence to your advantage as well.
Absolutely. Sometimes the absence of sound can be even more effective than any jump scare. You can also incorporate like psychological elements into the game. So maybe the characters start experiencing like hallucination or paranoia, or they find clues that, suggest that something really sinister is going on, but you don't reveal the full truth. You keep them guessing.
Right. You could even like introduce a sanity mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where like characters who witness too many horrific events or make bad choices start to lose their grip on reality.
That's a great idea. It adds a whole layer of like risk and consequence to those horror elements.
Exactly. Speaking of risk and consequence, let's talk about action adventure games like The Legend of Zelda and God of War. So these games are often filled with like epic battles and challenging dungeons and these larger-than-life characters. How do you capture that sense of like scale and excitement in a one-shot?
Well, I think it's important to create a sense of momentum and urgency. You want the players to feel like they're constantly moving forward, facing new challenges, overcoming obstacles. So maybe you structure the one shot as like a series of encounters, each with its own like unique objective and reward. So maybe they need to infiltrate a fortress or rescue a captive or retrieve a powerful artifact.
And throw in some environmental puzzles along the way to keep things interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Or traps. Yeah. You could also incorporate like chase scenes or other really dynamic elements to break up the combat and keep the pacing, fast paced.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't forget about the boss battles.
Oh, of course not.
The boss battles.
Those are often some of the most memorable parts of those games. So you got to make sure you create challenging and engaging encounters that really test the players.
For sure. And maybe give the boss some unique abilities or weaknesses that the players need to kind of figure out and exploit.
Exactly. You want it to feel like a culmination of everything they've learned and experienced throughout the whole one shot.
For sure.
All right. Now, let's move on to RPGs and strategy games.
These genres often have really complex character progression systems and branching storylines and a heavy emphasis on choice and consequence. So how do you distill all of those elements into a one-shot format?
Well, I think the key is to really focus on a specific aspect of the game and build your one shot around that. So for example, if you're adapting a game like Final Fantasy, you might focus on the job system and allow the players to choose different classes with, unique abilities.
Or if you're adapting a game like Fire Emblem, you might focus on the tactical combat and create a series of encounters where, positioning and terrain and character relationships really matter.
Yeah, and you can still incorporate elements of choice and consequence even in a condensed format.
Okay.
So maybe the players have to make a really difficult decision early on.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of like sets the course for the entire one shot.
Right, or their actions have like ripple effects
Uh-huh.
that they don't realize until later in the game.
Exactly. You want to create a sense that the world is reacting to their choices, even if it's in subtle ways.
Yeah, that's great. Now let's talk about sci-fi games.
Okay.
Games like Mass Effect and Halo.
Right.
So they often feature, futuristic technology,
Yeah.
alien races,
Yeah.
epic space battles.
Right.
How do you translate those things into a D&D setting?
Well, sci-fi adaptations can be a lot of fun because
Yeah.
you can get really creative with like technology and world building. You
Yeah.
might need to introduce, some new rules for futuristic weapons and vehicles and gadgets.
And you can use existing D&D races or
Yeah.
even create new ones to represent the alien species from the game.
Right. It's really up to you.
Yeah. And maybe even adapt the magic system, right?
Oh, for sure.
So that it reflects the technology. Maybe spells are cast through like technological devices or
Right.
certain magical effects are explained as scientific phenomena.
Yeah, it's all about making the setting feel consistent and believable.
Exactly.
Within the D&D framework.
Yeah. And finally, let's talk about post-apocalyptic games like Fallout
Okay.
and The Last of Us. So these games often explore themes of like survival
Right.
and loss and hope in a world that's been ravaged by disaster.
Yeah.
How do you capture those themes and create like a meaningful experience for the players?
Well, I think it's important to create a sense of scarcity and danger.
Okay.
The players need to feel like they're constantly struggling to survive.
Right.
Scavenging for resources, making difficult choices.
You could introduce mechanics for hunger
Right.
and thirst.
Yeah.
And radiation poisoning or other environmental hazards.
For sure. And create a world where moral ambiguity is really prevalent.
Okay, yeah.
And there are no easy answers.
Mhm.
So, maybe the players have to choose between helping a group of survivors or hoarding resources for themselves.
Right. Or they might have to make a decision that sacrifices
Uh-huh.
the few to save the many.
Yeah, those kinds of dilemmas can really, make the players think about the themes of the game and the choices that they make.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground today exploring like all these challenges and possibilities
Yeah.
of adapting video games to D&D.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more important point, and that is respecting the source material.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So while it's important to be creative and adapt the game to fit your needs,
Yeah.
you also want to honor the spirit of the original work. You want to like capture what made that game so special in the first place.
For sure. You don't want to just like exploit it. You want to really celebrate it.
Exactly. And so don't be afraid to, do your research, watch playthroughs, read wikis, really immerse yourself in the world of the game. And, talk to fans, get their insights,
Yeah.
understand like what they love about
It
it.
makes it tick. Yeah.
Yeah. And most importantly, be respectful of the creators
Yeah.
and the fans.
For sure.
Don't just exploit the game for your own game.
Right.
Celebrate it, share your love for it,
Yeah.
and use your D&D adaptation as a way to introduce other people to this world that you find meaningful.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that brings us back to like the core of what we've been discussing today, right?
Yeah.
Like the power of storytelling
Yeah.
and the joy of these like shared experiences.
Absolutely.
So whether you're, a seasoned dungeon master or just starting out,
Right.
adapting your favorite video game to D&D can be such a rewarding experience.
It is. It lets you kind of revisit a world that you love.
Yeah.
And explore like new possibilities and
Yeah.
create something really unique
Yeah.
with your friends. So yeah, embrace the challenge, unleash your creativity. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Who knows? You might just create something truly amazing.
That's a fantastic note to end on.
Yeah.
So, as we've been talking about these adaptations, I've been like really thinking about just how much potential there is for creativity and innovation.
Oh yeah.
It's not just about like recreating existing games.
No.
It's about using them as a springboard for something totally new.
I agree. I think we're really just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
Of what's possible when you start, blending video games and tabletop RPGs.
Imagine like taking the open world exploration of a game like Skyrim and combining it with like the strategic combat of a game like XCOM.
Yeah.
Or blending like the narrative depth of a game like The Last of Us with the social deduction elements of a game like Among Us.
Yeah, the possibilities are really endless.
And I think this is where the LitRPG genre like really shines.
I agree.
It's not just about adapting video games to B&D. It's about exploring that intersection of those two worlds and creating something like completely new.
Exactly, yeah. Pushing the boundaries of gaming and storytelling.
Yeah, and creating these experiences that are like so engaging and immersive and truly unforgettable.
So, if you're a gamer who's curious about tabletop RPGs or you're a D&D player who's, looking for some fresh inspiration,
Yeah.
I really encourage you to check out the world of LitRPG.
Yeah.
You might just discover your next great adventure.
Absolutely. And now for a thought to leave you with.
Okay.
So Mensa focus on classic games in her articles.
Right.
But, the world of video games is constantly evolving.
It is, always.
So what recent games with their unique mechanics and these like captivating narratives would you love to see like brought to life on the D&D table?
Yeah, what game would you bring?
Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and, maybe even explore some of those adaptations in a future deep dive.
That would be fun.
A big thanks to LitRPG Reads and to author Paul Bello for inspiring this deep dive into the world of video game-inspired D&D.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice.
Yes.
And may your adventures be legendary.
I think one of the most interesting things about this whole, like, adapting video games to D&D is that you're not just limited to, like, existing mechanics.
Yeah.
There's so much room for, like, coming up with your own stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you could take inspiration from a video game, but then, like, twist it and turn it into something completely new for your D&D game.
Exactly. Like, imagine taking, I don't know, like, the crafting system from a game like Minecraft.
Okay.
And incorporating that into D&D. So instead of just, like, finding magic items,
Right.
your players could actually, like, gather resources and craft their own.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Or what about, like, I don't know, like the Nemesis system from the Shadow of Mordor games?
Oh, yeah.
Like where enemies actually, like, remember your encounters
Yeah.
and evolve based on, how you defeat them or if they defeat you.
Right. Like, how could you incorporate that into a D&D campaign?
Yeah, that would be
really interesting.
You could have, like, recurring villains
right.
who, like, change their tactics and become more powerful
Yeah.
based on, like, their past interactions with the party.
And it would make the players, like, really think about their strategies.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, like, defeating the enemy in the moment.
Yeah.
It's about, like, how your actions are going to affect future encounters.
Right. You're thinking long term.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're, like, playing chess with the dungeon master,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that makes, like, tabletop RPGs so much fun is that it's this constant back and forth
Yeah.
between the players and the DM.
Right. You're both, like, trying to outsmart each other,
Yeah.
but in a fun way.
Exactly. It's collaborative storytelling
Yes.
at its best.
And it's just so cool how video games can kind of, like, feed into that and
Yeah.
and provide new ideas and inspiration.
I think it really speaks to, like, the versatility of tabletop RPGs.
Right.
You can really adapt them to fit any kind of story you want to tell.
That's a great point. It's like D&D is like this blank canvas,
Yeah.
right?
It is.
And video games are like all these different colors that you can, like, splash onto the canvas to create something new.
I love that analogy.
So for all the dungeon masters out there listening, don't be afraid to borrow from your favorite video games.
Yes.
And to experiment and see what kind of amazing worlds you can create.
It's really all about, like, embracing that spirit of creativity and having fun with it.
Absolutely.
Don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
But before we go, I just want to say a huge thank you to LitRPG Reads and to author Paul Bello for inspiring this conversation.
Yes, thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out LitRPG Reads for more great content on LitRPG and all things gaming and fantasy.
And don't forget to let us know in the comments what video game you would love to see adapted to D&D.
Yes, we love hearing from you.
So until next time, keep rolling those dice.
Yeah.
And keep those imaginations firing.